There are certain human qualities, I suppose, that are universally respected. We remember that we're reading about Naaman in the Hebrew scriptures. And those qualities, among those, would be bravery, loyalty, wisdom, strength. And the fact that Naaman had these qualities could not be denied even by his conquered enemies in Israel. But Naaman, we see, also had a very serious problem. He had the terrible disease of leprosy. Naaman was therefore living with a death sentence. No matter how strong or brave he was, Naaman was helpless against this foe. In ancient times, leprosy was not only a terrible, disfiguring disease leading to certain and early death. This disease came with a special bonus. It was considered to be a curse from God. So apparently on the outskirts of large cities, they would dig large pits and force people stricken with leprosy to live there to keep them separate from the general population. Lepers were not allowed to pass within 50 yards or so of a clean person. They were forced to yell, "Unclean, unclean," when they saw somebody approaching, so they would know to keep their distance. And if necessary, they were kept at bay with stones. So you get the picture. Hopeless. And where do you turn when things in your own life feel hopeless? When you can't really do a thing to help yourself. There's an old adage, God helps those who help themselves. What about when we can't help ourselves? Well, the military commander, Naaman, was used to giving orders, not taking them. He was used to solving problems, attacking them even. But now he found himself in a new position. He is helpless and he is hopeless, like anybody else stricken with this disease. Naturally, Naaman believes that if there is any hope for him, it will come through the chain of command. A powerful person often looks to those with power and authority for the answers. Verse 2, one day while the Syrian troops were raiding Israel, they captured a girl, and she became a servant of Naaman's wife. Sometime later, the girl said, "If your husband Naaman would go to the prophet in Samaria, he would be cured of leprosy." Now, you can't get much lower on the chain of command than a captured servant girl. This is pretty much the bottom rung of the ladder, or at least very close to it. In fact, it's so low that the striking thing about this verse is that this captured servant girl dares to even speak to the wife of the commander of the foreign army that has just ripped her away from her own home and her family. And when she does speak, she's offering assistance. She apparently is trying to help this stricken commander. Of course, not many people can get an audience with the king, but Naaman can. Verse 4, when Naaman told the king that what the girl had said, the king replied, "Go ahead, I will give you a letter to take to the king of Israel." And Naaman left and took along 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 new outfits. He also carried the letter to the king of Israel. It said, "I am sending my servant Naaman to you. Would you cure him of his leprosy?" Let's face it, that's the way the world usually works. It's who you know. The servant girl didn't say a thing about the king, but Naaman lives in a world of power and titles, and so and money and influence, and he knows how things get done. The letter from my king, Naaman thinks, combined with 750 pounds of silver, another 150 pounds of gold, and a whole bunch of new flashy outfits, ought to get me an audience with the king of Israel. Again, where do you look for help? Where do we put our trust? Is it in our bank accounts? Is it in our exercise regimen? Is it in our retirement plans? Is it our insurance policies? all good things if you can get them, I suppose, but if you're looking for real hope, for what Jesus will call life abundant, then these things are going to come up short. Naaman, the commander of the Syrian armies, was desperate, so he leveraged all of his own power and influence on behalf of himself, and he headed off to Israel. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in fear and shouted, "That Syrian king believes I can cure this man of leprosy? Does he think I'm God with power over life and death? He must be trying to pick a fight with me." Sometimes all of the power and wealth in the world can't or won't do a thing for you. And Naaman was sure that wealth and power could solve his problem, or at least it was his best shot. He was not about to put his faith in the advice of an ordinary servant girl that had been captured. He would rely on power and influence and the force of his own will. But Naaman did not get his audience with the king of Israel, after all. The king thought this was all a trick. He wanted nothing to do with Naaman. It turns out the king was afraid. Naaman was told to go and see the prophet Elisha, just as the servant girl had instructed him to do, or told his wife at least. The prophet is no king, Naaman must be thinking, but at least I'm going to see somebody with some authority. So verse 9, Naaman left with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent someone outside to say to Naaman, "Go wash 7 times in the Jordan River, and then you'll be completely cured." But Naaman stormed off, grumbling, "Why couldn't he come out and talk to me?" Once again, Naaman doesn't even get to see the person in charge. He has to deal with servants, and he doesn't like it one little bit. But in spite of Naaman's faith in the chain of command, in power and wealth and titles and influence and patriotism, why can't I wash in a river in my own country, right? Why do I have to go wash in the dirty Jordan River in Israel? In spite of all of this, Naaman is made whole. He is healed. That captured servant girl was right all along. Her world had crumbled. She had been taken from her home and family to serve in the enemy commander's household. When we look at this story from the outside, she looks to be the least powerful, least influential person in the whole thing. There are kings, 2 of them in fact, and military officers in this story, great wealth and the might of empires. But the real power and hope is found in the faith of a captured servant girl. She brings the mighty Naaman to the God of grace and healing. Notice, Naaman's status or faith or willpower has nothing to do with his healing in the end. Earlier in the 5th chapter of Luke, another person stricken with the terrible disease of leprosy throws himself at the foot of Jesus. He breaks right through that 50-yard barrier, and apparently he's not yelling out, "Unclean, unclean." He just drops in front of Jesus, and rather than yelling out that he's coming, he says to Jesus, "If you choose, you can make me clean." It's one of my favorite little encounters with Jesus in the Gospels, because of the way this word, this man chooses his words. He says, "If you choose," Jesus. That, after all, is what Jesus does. He chooses. He chooses to stand with the poor, the thrown out, the condemned, the forgotten, the devastated. Jesus chooses to take your brokenness, those times when you cannot seem to be able to help yourself in any sort of way. Jesus takes upon himself your sin. He chooses to take all of that and to die with it on the cross and give us back something better. a new life, a promise and hope of resurrection. If you choose, the man with leprosy says, you can make me clean. And I always picture Jesus smiling just a little bit when he looks at how this man worded this plea, because what Jesus does next sets the tone for his entire earthly ministry. And we know that he has now, by the 9th chapter, set his face toward Jerusalem. Ignoring the religious implications and the just straight up medical fears of the day, Jesus reaches out and touches this man, physically touches him, this man stricken with leprosy, who would be living in a pit outside of the city, required to yell, unclean, unclean, if he's going to get within 50 yards of anybody, who would be kept at bay with rocks. Jesus reaches out and grabs onto this man and says, I do choose. I do choose. Of course, this man was made clean by that touch, and he couldn't help telling everybody who would listen how it happened for him. On the other hand, Jesus was made ritually impure by this touch, unclean, but his face was set toward Jerusalem, where a cross and an empty tomb await. This is my body given for you, he will say when he gets there. My blood shed for you for the forgiveness of your sins. To do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Hope and healing not dependent on your will, your worthiness, or the strength of your faith. Jesus does choose. He chooses you. Thanks be to God.